Blog Talk Radio.
I just want to make a brief comment to get back to the discussion about the health disparities in the African American community, because it really is very important. And the reason I want to bring it up because I couldn't help sitting there reflecting about sometimes when you're in the middle of a crisis like we are now with the coronavirus, it really does have ultimately shine a very bright light on some of the real weaknesses and foibles in our society. And as some of you know, the greater proportion of my professional career has been defined by HIV/AIDS. And if you go back then, during that period of time when there was extraordinary stigma, particularly against the gay community, and it was only when the world realized how the gay community responded to this outbreak with incredible courage and dignity and strength and activism, that I think that really changed some of the stigma against the gay community, very much so. I see a similarity here because health disparities have always existed for the African American community. But here again, with the crisis, how it's shining a bright light on how unacceptable that is. Because yet again, when you have a situation like the coronavirus, they are suffering disproportionately. As Dr. Berg said correctly, it's not that they're getting infected more often, it's that when they do get infected, their underlying medical conditions, the diabetes, the hypertension, the obesity, the asthma, those are the kind of things that wind them up in the ICU and ultimately give them a higher death rate. So when all this is over, and as we said, it will end, we will get over coronavirus, but there will still be health disparities, which we really do need to address in the African American community. Thanks. Well said.
Good evening. Welcome to another edition of the Batchelor News Radio Show. It's a Monday. Just hoping everyone is safe wherever you are, wherever you're listening. We certainly appreciate you checking in wherever you are. Thank you so much for doing so. 646-929-0130, the number to get in touch with us. Press 1 to get on the line. If you have a question, comments, or concerns, of course, on any topic that we have and any of our guests, you can hit us up. Also, of course, you can hit us up on Facebook at Pad Nation, Pad Nation 2, that's the number 2, at Twitter, Instagram, LABachelor40 at gmail.com as well. Let's get right to it. Bringing to my two guests. Of course, always good to have these police chiefs and chiefs to be on the phone. Of course, he is the chief of police in Little Rock, Arkansas. He's Chief Humphrey, and Virgil Green, candidate for sheriff in Oklahoma City, Oklahoma, on the line. And gentlemen, always good to have you on.
Hey, thank you, LA. It's good to hear your voice too.
Yes, sir.
Likewise, LA. Glad to be on, and hopefully everything is going all right with you.
And I say the same to thee. I hope all is well with you, not just in your city, but in your with your families as well. And we'll talk about a show you guys coming up on this network really, really soon. I want to go to, you heard the excerpt, Chief Humphrey, from Dr. Fauci, who's on the commission for the White House, and talk about this pandemic and when to step in and step out. And so people are still, for the most part, in some places, I don't know about Arkansas, you can let me in on there, but people are trying to follow the guidelines of the health professionals, the doctor and others. But some people are still not only going out, but they're going out because of necessities. They have to get groceries, they need tissues and things of that nature. And when they go out, more specifically black and brown people, even more specifically African Americans, when they go out, they're wearing masks, or sometimes in some cases bandanas, where they take it from their head, they put it around their nose and mouth to cover themselves and keep themselves safe from the virus. But, Chief, there's an alarming number of racial profiling cases that are going on across the country. And to me, it's not only blatant racism, and I can bring up the stats if people don't believe me, but it's also the fact that law enforcement in these areas, in these cases, know that people are wearing masks because of the pandemic virus. I mean, if there's an increased number of people walking around with masks, I mean, that law enforcement, with all due respect, and if I could just be blunt, is either really stupid or racist in that case. Going around the store, if you're that concerned, and we'll get into the stores, if you're that concerned about black and brown people committing crimes because they have those masks on, then maybe you put some different things in place. But talk about this. It's either one of the two, in my opinion, humbly, Chief Humphrey, that either the law enforcement is really naive and stupid, or they are really profiling based on the color of the skin.
LA, you and I talked, and I told you we're going to always be, I'm going to always be honest with you. It's very disturbing that you can have, where it seems as though when you are a person of color, it seems like we have these discussions much too often. And my question is, why? Why would you have a problem with someone who is trying to minimize their chances of contracting the corona? It's been told, the Surgeon General has said, there's all kind of, you're looking at shows every day, and they have said the best thing to do is protect yourself is by wearing a mask. I mean, that has been said, it's been echoed over and over again. And so you really have to look at the fact of, without any other mitigating acts, as far as, mitigating acts, why would you tell someone they can't wear a mask? I mean, especially when it comes to a health and safety issue, I don't know. And it's got to be one of those two things that you said. If it's not for probable cause or for a reasonable suspicious type of action, then it's got to be racial, or it's got to be a lack of competency. Because what is suspicious? And if you tell me that because I walk in, I'm an African American male, and I walk in a store, and I've got a mask on during this pandemic, but you have a person of another race that does the same thing, what makes me more suspicious than this person if I just walked into the store? So I can't explain it. That's something that those organizations are going to have to explain. Once again, you and I have talked about this. We take 50 steps forward. Now you just knock me back 1,000 steps. So it is very disheartening. And we do have to realize people do have to travel to buy the necessities. People go to work. People take their kids to daycare still or to babysitters. And you have to be cognizant of that and respect that and be empathetic with that fact that, people still have to go by their daily duties.
And Chief Green, this doesn't even add in those who don't have a car, so they're walking down the street with those masks on, whatever mask it may be. So it really, that even exasperates the situation. And as Chief Humphrey said, white guy walking down the street or pulling up in his car. And pulling up in the car is a whole different. Okay, so they're robbing, but they're pulling up in the car with a mask on. It's just none of it makes any sense in terms of the increase of racial profiling. We already know it happens, but the increase is really beyond me in itself. But what would be some of those? You can speak to that, Chief Green. But what also would be some of those scenarios where you see someone with a mask? What should law enforcement look for rather than racial profiling if they think there's some suspicions? What would be those suspicions if you're black?
And this, just like, Chief Humphrey was saying, I mean, this is a problem that you would think we wouldn't have in this situation where African Americans or any person of color are being profiled or being targeted because they've got whether it be a blue mask on or a pink or a red, but you've got this problem within the law enforcement community that some officers just cannot get it out of their system. And I'm going to be just as honest with you in your audience, just like Chief Humphrey has stated. It is just something that some people just cannot look over. And if they see a person with a blue bandana on, then to them, oh, that's the sign of a gang, or they're going to go in and they're going to rob this store. But again, it's this pandemic is all across the country, and everybody has been told to wear some type of a mask. If you can't buy a surgical mask, buy a bandana. But just a couple of days ago, I was reading an article where even in Nashville, two gentlemen were escorted out of a Kroger store because they had a mask on. The same thing happened at a Walmart. And again, law enforcement continues to put themselves in these situations, and this is why we continue to have these conversations, is because you got too many guys who put themselves in a situation. If it's not a problem with the store, why is it a problem with that police officer? If that person is just walking around the store shopping.
Yeah, and I was going to say, you brought up a point, Chief Green, Chief Humphrey. What about the stores? The stores are just as culpable as the law enforcement in some cases, where they may not even be law enforcement there to stop and frisk, if you will, or stop and question. But the store people that work there, a manager may see someone. And again, it's so blatantly racist to me. There's a virus going on. You're not going to see 5 people with a mask on in the store under normal circumstances. Well, all 5 people are going to rob you? It makes no sense. But what about the store, Chief? How do you manage that? Like, I guess you have to respond to that if they say, hey, it's a suspicious character in the store. How do you even deal with that and put those personal things aside?
Well, LA, right up from the call, but a couple of years ago we had all those calls where you were being complained on, people of color were being complained on. One was well, this guy's in the swimming pool, he's got his socks on. And so you call and you make that report. And so police departments throughout the nation start educating their call takers on the questions to ask to see if it was even a criminal act. And so that's one of the things, we train our emergency communication employees, ask the questions. Well, what is this person's doing? Well, he just walked in with a mask. Okay, there is a pandemic, yes, but he walked in from, okay, what else has he done? Nothing. They just walked in. Okay, is he the only person or she the only person with a mask? No. Okay, any other actions, any other suspicious? No, they have a mask on. Those are the kind of calls that if you get there, you may not even have the right as a police officer. There may not be any elements of an offense. There may not be any suspicious activity. It takes, you should be contacting that person call to get more information. And if it's not a criminal act, LA, then you leave. Where we get into trouble is we try to make it a criminal act, or we try to, show a reason for us being there. And so, one of the things that happens is that, a person that's put in that position does have a right to sue, does have a right to bring it forth to the media and things like that. And a lot of times there's just no telling how many of those situations are occurring. But your supervisors have to be sharing this in briefings. Hey, listen, we're not. This is a pandemic. People are going to have masks. Absent anyone with a weapon, anyone that's assaulting someone, anyone that just because somebody walks in a mask, there's millions of people walking in stores with masks. That it doesn't make them a bad person, and we have to make sure that we are getting the right information up front, because a lot of times we make it worse. The situation, let's go back a few years, the situation in Philadelphia. There was no reason to contact those individuals. They weren't doing anything. And so we exacerbated by going up, contacting people, telling people we're here because this person called, instead of saying, hey, listen, we came, we didn't see anything, just letting you know, go on about your business. We don't do that. And so and I don't mean all of law enforcement. There are those officers that don't do that. They feel as though because they're there, they have to enforce maybe a law that doesn't exist. And that's what gets us in trouble.
Did we lose him?
I'm here. If you're just joining us, we're talking with Chief Humphrey, of course, Chief of Police, Little Rock, Arkansas. And, of course, I call Chief-to-be Virgil Green in Oklahoma City, Oklahoma, here on the Batchelor News radio show. Chief Green, when you look at the mask aspect of it, playing advocate should, and some people may not have that, may not want that, but should people of color, should black people, Hispanics wear sort of the smaller surgical mask, not the N95s that they say leave for the doctors and nurses and people, but just a regular mask, a regular cotton mask or a homemade mask, rather than those vendettas where you see a lot in gangs like Crips and Bloods. I mean, would that make a difference, or what do you think?
Well, I mean, it could make a difference, but it just kind of goes back to why should an African American or any person of color be cognizant to where they go and their appearance during this pandemic. I mean, if they're going into a Kroger or any other Walmart store and they've got on a red bandana or a blue bandana or whatever color it may be, and somebody suspects that just because they have a certain color on, now there's a heightened sense that this person may not be in here shopping for, whatever necessity that they need. And now the police are called, and then the police comes out, and that officer determines that, well, I need to walk up and I need to ask you a question. Do you have your ID? Now you've just taken that to another level, because now that person is going to become defensive as to, why are you asking me for my ID? I didn't do anything. I'm in here buying some bread or buying some milk, and now you want my ID. Well, now that officer feels that he's giving you an order and you've got to comply with it. And some people feel that I don't have to do that because I haven't done anything. So now you've escalated the situation instead of de-escalating the situation. So, again, I don't believe that people should be cautious of where you're shopping at. And we've got African Americans who live in very well communities, and if they decide to go into their local store that is a high-profile store, now they may become a target because that person says, well, you don't look familiar. You've got on a yellow bandana, and I've heard, oh, that's associated with this Hoover gang or whatever. So, again, it just goes back to so many people there's a need to be concerned about it, but at the same time, why are you getting law enforcement involved in it, especially when a crime hasn't been occurred?
Yeah, and that's what I don't get. And Chief, when the same question to you, if they're wearing, they decide that's what they want to wear rather than that smaller mask, or that's the only thing they have. They might have had it as a scarf or whatever the case may be. Some people even use a scarf to put on their face. Does that make them a murderer or someone who's going to rob someone? Does it make a difference if they had the regular mask as opposed to anything that would be deemed as gang related or otherwise?
No, LA, because there's no, the N95 is the recommended mask. That's the recommended. It's a recommendation. But there's also said, I go back to the Surgeon Generals and other doctors that said anything is better than nothing, as long as you make sure that it is it's been sterilized or washed on a regular basis. Anything is better than nothing. So no, you can't. You can't single out a group of people because that may be the best thing that they can do, the best thing that they can utilize to protect themselves from contracting the virus. So no, it shouldn't matter. There's signs at banks that say before this epidemic came on, there's signs at banks that say you cannot enter this facility with a helmet or mask or anything, scarves. Okay, we understand that. But even banks now have gotten to the point, are at the point where they understand, the ones that are open. We know they're going through drive-throughs. I mean, do you tell somebody who's in a drive-through, I'm not going to serve you your money or give you money because you have a mask on? You haven't done anything else but drive up with a mask on during this pandemic. Are you going to tell them that you're not going to provide them their money that they have in your bank? Absolutely not. So I think we do at times, as law enforcement, we do go overboard. We do look for reasons. There are those individuals that look for reasons to display this hatred or this racism or this profiling for a reason. Not all of law enforcement. We've talked about 99% of law enforcement does the right thing, but it takes that 1%, just that one incident, and it doesn't matter how large or how small the police department is, that one incident is going to put that police department and that city in the spotlight, the national spotlight. And so we take steps back, LA, when we do these things, and it's very frustrating to me as a chief of police, and especially as an African American chief of police. This is very frustrating to me. We shouldn't even have to have this conversation.
Yeah. So and Chief Green, I guess when you look at this, the scariest thing, and I'm gonna go back and ask the same or make the same comment question to Chief Humphrey. The scary part of this is what people don't understand, that there are laws on the book in cities and counties across this country that you are not allowed to wear a mask in public like that, and more specifically in stores. So to me, that even more escalates and exasperates the issue, Chief Green, because if someone's in a town that they don't know what the law is, that law enforcement person could either uh, enforce that law because he is racist or he's following the books, or not. And what's to say that he says, look, according to sections, whatever you guys know, and in terms of whatever you guys say, this is a law, and that person reacts like you said. Well, wait a minute, I'm not doing anything wrong. Then all of a sudden, you have a real issue on your hands, Chief Green.
Yeah, and that's the scary part about it is that, you've got every municipality may have a different ordinance. They may have a different law that says you can't enter a store with, say, a 7-Eleven or any other type of convenience store with a mask on or some type of bandana or anything that's covering your face where only your eyes are visible. And now all of a sudden it becomes very contentious between that citizen and that police officer. And this is the one thing I think we have a problem with in law enforcement is that we don't listen. We have a big problem that we are the ones who you need to listen to what we're telling you versus the officer listening to the citizen. And that becomes a problem because that officer feels like, well, you're questioning my authority, and now I'm going to take it to a whole nother level. And you have so many people who have seen so many videos. Now people are taking out their cell phones, they're recording everything. And now that officer, it goes from one officer to maybe 5 officers. And now you just continue to escalate the situation. And, just something I was just reading a few days ago up in Illinois where 2 black men were in a Walmart and they actually had on the surgical mask, not a bandana, but they had on surgical masks, and a police officer followed them through the store. And in the video, you clearly see him with his hand on his weapon, and he's telling these 2 guys that they have to leave the store. Now, they've got on the required surgical mask that we have heard the medical professions repeat that this is something that you should wear. But even though they had the required mask on, they were still profiled and they were still told that they had to leave the store. So, again, this is a conversation that, like Chief Humphrey said, that we shouldn't be having, but we're having, and we're going to continue to have it because it just goes back to the cycle of with this issue, and we're going to probably even have more issues, that the law enforcement community really needs to understand that we have a place, and here's a place for the citizens. And all too many times, we want to overcross that line and become more of the authority figure than what we should be versus having some kind of compassion and understanding what the general public is going through.
Chief Humphrey, final thoughts on that. I know my next guest is on the line. I'm gonna come back to you, both of you, in a second. But final thoughts on that. Following up what Chief Green said.
Man, we do put ourselves in this situation, and we do, as I said earlier, exacerbate the situation. A lot of times, LA, what happens is we go out to that scene, and we may not even have the authority to do anything, but then we start telling them individuals, you have to leave. Well, that's not for us to tell. They have to be asked to leave by that store owner. And so we take it upon ourselves to tell that person that they have to leave. Really and truly, what you're doing is you're lighting a fuse, because what if that person tells you they're not going to leave, and then it ends up escalating, and you end up taking this person to jail or something else? Well, really and truly, you didn't have the authority to do that, and so we have to make sure that we're training our officers to know the law, do the right thing, walk away when there's nothing we can do. Tell people there's nothing we can do when we get there on scene. And then then that's what we're not doing in some of these cases.
Yeah, and I want to see if you guys can hold the line. I'll talk to you. I'm gonna put you on hold, and I'm gonna come back to you in just a minute. Just stand by for me, if you can. Chief Keith Humphrey, Chief of Police in Little Rock, Arkansas. Virgil Green, candidate for sheriff in Oklahoma City, Oklahoma. Here, law enforcement, so important. I understand that the first responders and the doctors and the nurses and all of those, but law enforcement is just a part of that crucial place to be in terms of this virus, and then on a regular basis as well. We salute them. I'm going to come back to them in just a second. 646-929-0130, the number to get in touch with us. Come back, we'll talk with Avneet Singh. He's the founder of the nonprofit company called The Voice of Mankind. It's a think tank, I should say, nonprofit think tank. Going to join us to discuss the long-term consequences of the virus on the economy and where do we go from here. It is the Batchelor News Radio Show. Stay tuned. Wrong with that. 646-929-0130 to get in touch with us. Press 1 to get on the line. It is the Batchelor News Radio Show. Of course, you can hit us up on Facebook at Pat Nation 2, at Twitter. And, of course, you can send us your questions and comments at labachelor40@gmail.com. Back to the phones we bring in, as I mentioned before the break. He's the founder of the nonprofit think tank called Voice of Mankind. He is making his debut. His name is Avneet Singh. And Mr. Singh, we appreciate you coming on the show, sir.
Thank you, Ollie. Thank you for having me on.
Earlier in the show, I played a piece from Dr. Fauci, who has been, of course, at the forefront at the White House, talking about when, based on the scientific evidence and everything else, that when things will get better and the curve and a lot of pressure is coming to him from not only the president, but the president's pressure coming from business owners that want to open up the economy. We see, in New York being the place where all the deaths, half of the deaths in this country have happened there in New York. And Governor Cuomo said that it's being flattened in terms of the curve. The curve is being flattened, and that's a good thing, but they still have losing a lot of lives, and there's a lot of lives lost across the country. So my question to you is, based on what you know and based on health versus economy, when do you think things should at best get back to normal?
Yeah, that's a good question. And I would like to say that there is no good answer. Nobody can confidently say, let's choose health over the economy or economy over the health. It's just this balancing act. and President Trump also said that this is going to be one of the most difficult decision in his life. So it's a very delicate answer, very delicate response. And we really need to delegate this to the experts like the CDC, Dr. Fauci. I think I saw Dr. Robert from the CDC today, and he said we are almost near the peak. And what he actually means is that we're almost at a point in time where the number of cases and the number of fatalities, deaths per day is flattening out and might go down, and that is a sign that we are at our peak. So once we reach there, once we know we are at a peak and it's going to get better now, then it's just a question of using the data models, looking at the situation, and then trying to follow it all the way down to a level where we can be comfortable that there's no new cases, the number of deaths is going down. And then that's, again, it's back to a balancing act. Like what point can we just say, hey, it's, we need to restart our economy and we can live with more debt. So I think it's going to be a balancing act, and it's going to be very difficult decisions. But I would say maybe in 3 to 4 weeks, we can seriously thinking of restarting the economy.
When you look at what the president has said and some others, namely mostly business people, I sort of get the feeling, though, Mr. Singh, that it's a numbers game where, okay, we're a country of 330, 40 some odd million people. Okay, so we can stand to lose 100,000 people. No big deal. And even if they don't stay at home, we can lose 200,000. No big deal. It seems as though, obviously, even if, God forbid, we lose that many people, there are always going to be people that replace them in jobs in the economy. When we go to war, people die, jobs open up, that kind of thing. But it seems sort of immoral that they're looking at it from that framework rather than understanding that, it could be really bad, and maybe the percentage of the population in this country as opposed to as it relates to the people who die may be a small percentage, but it's still a big number. Can you speak to that?
Yeah, so I think that the number 100,000 to 200,000 was the initial estimate from CDC, and they estimated that that many people could die if we did not take any drastic measures. So we have already taken that. We have isolations in place. We have lockdown in place. So the number will definitely go down. But again, it's like I said, it's the government or any responsible authority cannot let that happen. They cannot allow people to die. They have a moral responsibility. They also have, I'm sure they have some legal responsibilities as well. They will have to do all they can within reason to save those people. So I agree with you. If you put it in context, yeah, out of 320 million people in this country, 100,000, okay, maybe it's not a big number, but it's still, our families, our neighbors, our community, and then governments have a responsibility to take care of them. So I think they will, especially until we reach the peak, they'd rather save lives than worry about the economy. But once they see things are getting better, I think the balance will shift.
If you're just joining us, we're talking with Avneet Singh. He's the founder of the nonprofit think tank called Voice of Mankind here on the Batchelor News radio show. Mr. Singh, when you look at from the economy standpoint, now the president is saying he wants to reopen things. Obviously, gradually, some people are saying, but reopen by May 1st. Is this a smart move and a move that they're looking at from the standpoint of too much spending? They have these stimulus packages out there, the $2 trillion. They're coming up with another one that they want to maybe open up sooner because they don't want to spend more, or they're looking at the sort of the long-term scale of things, which you and I will get into in a minute, as it relates to the long-term economy.
Yeah, you're correct. I think there is talk that more people could die from the long-term economic, social, cultural effects of the COVID virus than from the virus itself. So what it really means is that there's going to be major economic consequences. There's going to be social, political consequences of this. And we can go through them one by one, but the social and the economic and political consequences are going to dwarf what we have seen in the last 2 months. So I think that's why there is this the pressure and the impetus on President Trump and his administration to get the economy moving, because you have people in isolation, you have people without jobs, you have failing businesses, you have the tidal wave of the stimulus, you have the fear of stagflation, you have the what they call the black hole of falling demand. So all of these collectively together will cause more damage, and the longer we leave them running, the longer we just ignore it, the potential long-term effects of these could be even worse than of the disease itself.
Talk about the short-term damage right now, and in the interim, if they do reopen the economy, if you will, say May 1st or sometime in May, what they can do to kind of jumpstart or stimulate the economy.
Yeah, so I think they've the stimulus package, that is the big thing. It's being rolled out as we speak. So that includes $2.2 trillion of money that's just been printed, and that's going to be pumped into the economy. And that includes about $300 billion for small businesses, $500 billion for local governments. There's $300 billion. So it's going to be money that's going to be spread around to stimulate the economy, because as with the tourism sector shut down, Hollywood is shut down. Airlines aren't flying, gyms are closed. It's just that we need this stimulus to jumpstart the economy. But however, that creates its own issues. For example, it's going to create more inflation. The supply chains are disrupted, which is going to again lead to higher prices, which is going to cause more higher inflation. So it's a right move under the circumstances, but then also it comes with its own long-term consequences.
Do you think if we were prepared for, and by the way, myself and a few other people I know have been talking about this virus last year and saying, hey, it's in China, we better get ready. And here we are. If we were better prepared, that we would not only be in a better economic position, but a better position to even, if we had to do what we're doing now, which is extend unemployment and put checks in people's hands and give out small business loans with grants and that type of thing, that it wouldn't be so bad. We wouldn't be so backed up. We wouldn't be so frustrated, and all of those things. Had we known and took better actions and preparations and being proactive beginning last year.
Yeah, definitely. Even before the coronavirus, our economy was a bubble, which what it really means is that through financial engineering, quantitative easing, and low interest rate loans, the stock market was inflated, whereas people were still struggling with record consumer debt, record automobile debt, record corporate, and record government debt. And that
right.
level of debt was unheard of, and that was going on even end of last year. So we weren't in a good enough position to face any crisis. It's like the expression is that the virus was the pin that pricked the bubble that had been blown up through financial engineering. So if we had a good economy that relied on producing useful things that we need, we could have easily jumpstart the economy. But to give you an example, a lot of companies went on IPO. A good example is a company called Atrium, which has recently shut down. they raised 75 millions to be a startup in the legal services sector. And after $75 million of capital, that they spend, they realized they don't really have much of a business plan, and they shut down right after the virus. So it's like, companies raising lots of money, employing people, but they really didn't have anything to show for it. So we had a massive bubble, and if we had a real an economy that produced stuff that people need, that the world needs, we could have weathered that storm much better.
And especially since, and you could go through several presidents, going back to, when you look at the Fannie Mae fiasco and all of that, we never even fixed that situation, like giving out loans to people knowing,
absolutely,
living above their means, so we never even fixed that part. That brings me to a question before we get to the long term. When you look at the economy and spending, and this used to be a Republican thing. Okay, we don't spend, and we're gonna cut all the fat out of the government and this, that, and the other. Everybody's spending now, Mr. Singh. Both parties don't care about an economy. They don't care about balancing budgets anymore. So talk about that. Where did that come about? Under what administration?
Yeah, that's a good question. I mean, you look at the history of the Tea Party and Republicans being fiscally conservative, but it's no longer that anymore. I think they're all out there outdoing each other to create a big government, to bring in socialism light, as we call it. I mean, even with now, people are going to be given stimulus packages. The corporations are going to be bailed out. The smaller local government bodies are going to be bailed out. So you're spot on. It's that the whole American way, fiscal conservatism, Tea Party movement, all of them are gone, and now it's they're competing against each other to see who can build a better government based on rising debt, rising taxes. So maybe this is the, I don't know if this is the new normal, but you're right. The principles of fiscal conservatism have been abandoned.
And I know you're a centrist, but if people are anti-socialism, right, but they're taking handouts at the same time, so you're pretty hypocritical if you're a farmer and you're against welfare and food stamps, but you're taking money, the farmer money from the government. Everybody's against socialism until they need the money. Then they're for socialism. I've always seen the thing. Final question. The most important question is, when we do reopen the economy, you look at the stimulus package that we talked about. We talked about bailing out small businesses. We haven't even talked about the corporate greed and stuff, that some of these corporations are going to take that money and not use it the way they should. What's going to be the long-term effect of this virus when everything gets back to what we call normal? And how are we going to be able to dig ourselves out?
Yeah, so it'll take a few years for sure. For example, for sure there's going to be falling demand because, immediately after the crisis is over, people aren't going to be flying, they're not going to be traveling. So there's what I call the black hole of falling demand. Demand will fall down, and that just means there's going to be less money in the economy, there's going to be recession, there's going to be fewer jobs. And the second element, part of a pillar of this is going to be, there's going to be stagflation, which is like stagnation with rising prices because of disrupted supply chain. And this is going to take a few years to clear. But then also there's, worryingly, there's also laws being passed while we look the other way, while our attention is distracted. I mean, a good example of this is the FISA, which is the Foreign Intelligence Services Act, which is an act that allows government to snoop on our private communications. So there's a lot of laws being passed, and the Electronic Frontier Foundation, the ACLU, the American Civil Liberties Union, they've already raised red flags and say that why we have been distracted. Laws have been passed that will undermine our freedoms. So those freedoms, loss of those freedoms could be an even bigger, more profound long-term consequence of the virus.
Yeah, that's a great point. I'm glad that you mentioned that, because those freedoms are going to be there. And heck, people, if you go ahead and book your flight now, it costs you about $2, and you can fly in December sometime, and you still got your ticket. I mean, maybe that'll help, Mr. Singh. Book now and fly later, something along those lines. But we shall see. Listen, I appreciate you coming on. Let's make this one of many times. I hope you're well and your family, and you enjoy the rest of your evening, sir. Thank you so much.
Absolutely. Thank you very much, and thank you for having me on. Thank you.
Take care. Avneet Singh, he's the founder of the nonprofit think tank called Voice of Mankind. Do look them up. Just Google Voice of Mankind. You'll see his picture there. And they deal with a lot of public policy from a centrist standpoint. They're in the center. Most people are in the center anyway. So I'm going to take a quick break. I want to bring back my chiefs, if you will, on the line. And I have a couple other questions, so I could not let them go without asking. So we'll get them back on the line. It is the Batchelor News Radio. Welcome back to the show. Thanks for joining us. 646-929-0130, the number to get in touch with us. Press 1 to get on the line. Thanks to Avneet Singh. He's the founder of the nonprofit think tank called Voice of Mankind. They look at topics and policies from a moral and economical and political standpoint. They're not a lobbyist; they're a nonprofit. So appreciate him coming on. I'm going to go back to my residence chiefs, if you will, Chief Humphrey and Virgil Green, on the line, and I wanted to keep you back on. I'll go back to you, Chief Humphrey. There is a debate about, and we may have talked about this, guys. How do you handle prisoners or people who are either incarcerated at the jail or even prison level, and because of in the midst of this virus? And there's a big concern, not only from a health standpoint inside, Chief, but also those who shouldn't be there in the midst of this. And I'll say this. There's a story, I forget the city, and I can't not find the article for the life of me, but it's a story out there, and I'm sure it's many of them. It was a young black man, and of course we're affected by all of this, inside in the jail or out of the jail, by this virus. But it was a young man who was in jail waiting to see a judge for, I guess, some traffic violations. Came in, was arrested, came in, waiting for his time to see the judge or the magistrate, and apparently was had the virus either coming in or got it there, and died. And he didn't even see the judge. So he's in there with a non-violent crime, and he's dead, Chief Humphrey. So again, it goes back to a couple of things. Number one, why it shows how we're not prepared for this virus at every level. But it also speaks to, if you know someone that you can always, I think you both said, you can always go back and pick the guy up if he doesn't show up for court or whatever the case. You know where he lives, or you can find him. And you would think minimize those who are incarcerated from getting the infection from people coming in or people going out. So it's very sad for that family that thinks that, hey, he might have made a mistake or whatever the violation was, but he would come home to see another day. He's not he might, even if he had a past, Chief Humphrey, of some kind of other crimes, he's in there for that crime, and he's dead. And so speak to that, what chiefs and what law enforcement could do or should do. I know it's above their head sometimes to deal with those non-violent criminals, to get them out of there, make sure they test it, but get them out of there so they won't have these type of cases and tests.
Yeah, fortunately, I don't have a jail. I don't run the jail here in Little Rock. It's the county that runs it. I will tell you that the sheriff here has done a remarkable job in ensuring that, number one, they minimize the possibility or probability of the virus spreading. He's not taking any nonviolent prisoners. We're issuing citations for majority of the crimes that are committed that we can. A lot of there are times when we go back and we get warrants for individuals to be served later. Officers are having to wear masks when they go into the jail. The jailers are wearing masks. Prisoners are wearing masks. But the main thing they're doing is, once somebody has those symptoms, they're immediately addressing that and finding methods to quarantine. But you see this what's happening throughout the nation. A lot of prisoners are being released based on the virus, based on the severity of their crimes. If you've got somebody who's been who's got a 10-year sentence and they've been there 7 years for a vehicle burglary, why should you keep them there? Now, that's not every situation. Of course, every situation is differently. But I think we've got to, if we're going to talk about this prison reform, and we're trying to give people second chances and things like this is a time to put up or shut up. No matter what you feel about Anthony Barr, I will say that he has issued that prison, that nonviolent prisoners should be released based on this. And so there are processes in place, but you just still have those individuals who feel like it's the letter of the law. The letter of the law says this is the law you violated. No matter what, you must be arrested. So we're having to go back and change our policies and things like that. So I do think that there are situations where you should be able to release people. I do think there are situations where you modify your policies when it comes to arresting individuals during this time, issue citations or get those warrants. I mean, those are things you have to put into place. Hey, this thing is serious, and we don't know how long it will be, but, you know, you don't have to arrest your way out of everything.
And Chief Green, you're running for sheriff, and you know sheriffs typically run the county, and a lot of, as Chief Humphrey said, it usually goes to the county, and in a lot of situations. So what would you do? And on top of that, listen, it's just like we said, the racial profiling 2 + 2 is 4. If you're not a rapist, or you robbed a bank, you murdered somebody, or you know, domestic violence or something, you know, something violent or armed, you should stay in jail. And then those who, you know, are on child support or whatever should be gone. How hard is that? And how do you as a sheriff even advocate if your superiors, or you know, mayor or whoever is your boss, may get the final say on that?
Well, one of the things here in Oklahoma City, where I am, and you know, I'm running for sheriff here in Oklahoma County, and currently right now the sheriff is actually overseeing the jail, but that's probably going to change, where a jail trust has been put in place. But the jail here has started releasing.
Real quick, what's a jail trust? Real quick, a jail trust.
So a jail trust is is the county commissioners formed a private entity to operate the day-to-day operations of the county jail. So Oklahoma County is the largest county in the state of Oklahoma. The jail population has been upwards up to 1,600 inmates in a county jail, and some of those inmates are on their way to DOC, but for the most part, some of them may spend 6 months in a county jail before they go to the Department of Corrections facility. So, but the county jail here has been releasing some inmates. I've spoken about this since I am a candidate for sheriff, that individuals who are arrested, and if it's a non-violent offense, whether it be shoplifting or, I think those individuals should be released, get them a bond, and not even brought into the jail, because now you're bringing somebody into a facility that you don't know what their health conditions are. And just because a person may look healthy, they may not even have a fever, that doesn't mean that a week from now that person doesn't start showing symptoms. And I think that one of the things that I think some of us are recognizing how serious this is, but so that one person that you bring in, a week later, they'll start showing symptoms that they may have this virus. Now, all of a sudden, that one person has came into contact with different jail detention officers, deputies, other civilian staff, and even other inmates inside of the jail. So you may go from one person to now you've got 100 people that this one person could possibly infect. And I think that's where we really need to understand that this is a very large situation we're dealing with. And for the jails, it's even much more, because now you've got people who are inside of a jail that they may have been there for several months, and they may become infected. And because it's airborne, we just don't know. So it's something that a lot of larger jails across the country are doing. releasing inmates who are nonviolent, whether it be, like I said, somebody who got arrested for non-child support, or maybe a person that's in prison and they're in prison because they got behind in the child support payments. Well, that person should be released. And, once this pandemic is over with, then things can kind of get back to some normalcy. But right now, with the rate of how many people are being infected, just off of on another subject, you got a meat packaging plant in somewhere in the country where 300 people have been tested positive. So you've got one whole pork meat plant that's been shut down because of 300 people. Now, just imagine that 300 people, how many people that they have came in contact with, and you put that same situation inside of a jail. It can really cause a lot of a lot of panic.
Yeah. If you're just joining us, we're talking with Chief Humphrey, Chief of Police of Little Rock, Arkansas, and Sheriff-elect, I like to say, and running for sheriff in Oklahoma City, Oklahoma, and the county, Virgil Green, who both will be co-hosts of a new show called Law Enforcement. You and the Law. It'll be airing very soon. We'll talk about that even more before they get out of here. Chief Humphrey, one of the things, and I'll ask Chief Green too, the Sheriff Green, the same thing. That a lot of people are saying basically, I've heard some law enforcement people say, okay, well, maybe you don't release those who are in jail or incarcerated, but you don't bring in those who are on the streets that are nonviolent. So that maybe alleviates the problem. Certainly, if there's a violent situation, then you want to bring them in. But to me, that overpopulates it. Then, if you're not going to release those nonviolent that are there, and you're just going to keep everybody, it's like if you have a space of 500, and you're at 500, and you're keeping people at you're keeping that space, that capacity at 500. You're going to get some violent crimes and violent people that are going to need to be incarcerated. So that's going to make the population even more. Why not release them, like we're saying, the nonviolent, and you'll still have the space and be able to treat those who are in there and have the space for those who are violent crimes people, or like I said, molesting or child abuse.
Yeah, what also happens, LA, is that some of those prisoners that you see are waiting to be transported, and they are, the state or the feds are paying those jails to hold those prisoners because there are lack of space in the prisons and things like that. There are a lot of sheriffs out here and a lot of departments that are sitting down prioritizing who needs to stay in jail. And so we're seeing more and more people released. We're seeing more and more people that sign promise to appear. I think some people are getting it, some not. I think but it's really it's not just this just didn't happen overnight with the COVID. We've tried to arrest our way out of everything. We felt as though, zero tolerance and putting everybody in jail was going to lower crime, and what we're finding it's not. And so now we find ourselves in a situation where it's going to make things worse because we do have all those people. And when you have all those people, then how do you do it? I mean, how do you protect them? Well, can you give them a mask every day?
Chief just said, I just got a email from someone that said, you do the crime, you do the time, but these are extraordinary circumstances that we've never seen, number one. Number two, that type of mentality and comment speaks to what I was saying to our previous guest, where there are business people say, okay, we're 300 plus million people in the country. Okay, we could 100,000 is a drop in the bucket. It's like they don't care about the lives. They care about, okay, you did the crime, you do the time. Like, where does that come from?
That comes from individuals who believe that people shouldn't give second chance. That comes from people who are punitive. And like I said, there are individuals who don't deserve a second chance based on the violence level of their crimes. But there are individuals that really don't need to be in jail or need to be alternatives. But I think those are individuals who want to be punitive. They don't see it any other way. This is the deal. They don't believe in reform. They believe the only way a person can change is that they have to pay their debt to society, and they must be punitive.
Sheriff Green, I will say, and I think we're getting an echo. I'm not sure where it's coming from. I'm not sure which one getting an echo there. But Sheriff Green, I want you to respond to that person who said that, and I hope, I'm believing that in your platform as you're running for sheriff, that as Chief Humphrey said, alternative measures or second chances would be part of your platform and sort of what you're going to bring to the sheriff department.
Well, and it's definitely something that I've talked about as I have campaigned, and that is there has to be alternatives to locking every person up who commits a crime. I mean, the person who sent you that message, if they do the time, they do the crime, they do the time. That's why we have a problem with all of our jails across the country and all of our prisons, because we just feel that you commit a crime, no matter how low of offense that crime is, that you should be in jail. And now we're seeing the results of years and decades, and now here's a pandemic, and everybody is trying to figure out every single day, what should we do? Okay, should we release 1,000 inmates out of a prison because they've been classified as nonviolent, and we need to release them? Well, 10 years ago or a decade ago, we should have been talking about how should we look at some type of, either whether it's on a local level in a county jail or on a state level in a prison, some type of jail reform or prison reform, to where it's not all about a person. Yeah, you commit a crime, there's a price you pay, but that price shouldn't come with somebody losing their life because of something that they have contracted while they're inside of a county jail or a state prison. So we've got to do a much better job, especially, and this is something that is hitting the African American and other minority communities even harder, because we've got more of us that are locked up in jails and prisons, and we got a lot of us who, when they do get out of jail, what resources do they have, where they're going to go? And so there's so many things that come along with that. And, then we got to look at, there's a lot of homeless population that's inside of a jail. There's a lot of people with mental illness that's inside of a jail. And now there's a pandemic going on, and everybody is trying to figure out how they're going to survive, where they're going to go, where they're going to get their next meal from. So this is something that is going to continue, and hopefully it gets better before it gets any worse. But it is definitely something that's a problem for law enforcement on a municipal level, even to a county level, as to how do you manage this situation to where you don't make it even worse than what it already is.
And Sheriff Green, just to stay with you, I'm glad you said that, because there's a lot of us locked up that look like the three of us talking, having this discussion. The three of us, we're very blunt in how you guys are much more professional and diplomatic than I am, of course, but we're very blunt in the way we discussed this is that, they locked up these Negroes, blank that. They in jail, then hey, you in jail, so if you get the virus, you get the virus. You die, you die. No skin off our back, and that I think that's sort of the conventional um, belief in a lot of not just some of your own that wear your same uniform, but just society. The communities as a whole. And staying with you, Sheriff Green, what would you do as a sheriff in terms of people coming in, making sure you do those proactive preventive measures to see if they have the virus or the symptoms, and then what would you do? Quarantine? How you quarantine? I know there's a lot of municipalities around the country that are using old jails and taking either the non-infected or the infected and putting and separating them based on the space that they have. So what would you do with those coming in, and how would you handle those already incarcerated in terms of the virus?
Well, one of the things that you mentioned, LA, is that we really don't know who's infected and who's not infected. And I think if we get that's the way I'm looking at it, because I don't believe that if a person is arrested, is brought in by any municipality, they go through the medical screening inside of the county jail. Well, it's not fully equipped to come back within 24 hours that they are negative or they're positive. So on a county level and a city level, the police chief and the sheriffs really need to be working together and really talking as to what is the best for their police officers, because again, you may come into contact with somebody that you don't know what that person has, and again, 2 weeks from now, that person may test positive, and all of a sudden now that police officer says, "Well, I arrested so and so 2 weeks ago." Well, he's been around his family, he's been around other police officers, he's been around other citizens. So I mean, this thing can just really just spread, and we're not really we're having that conversation. And I'll say this, we're talking about it, but are we really having that deep conversation about, and not just to cause panic or hysteria where people are saying, "Oh man, you guys are blowing this out of proportion." I don't really think we are, because I just go back to what I was just reading a while ago at a Smithfield pork plant where 300 people have been tested positive for this coronavirus. So you double that with all the people that they've come into contact with. Now you got people concerned, well, is the meat contaminated? So this is much bigger than any of us, but at the same time, we've got people who are so narrow-minded. Well, that person was caught in the local store shoplifting, so they need to go to jail. Well, right. I think as the sheriff, I would say, well, no, that person, you write them a citation, you let them come to court, and let the courts, they don't need to be put inside of a jail, because, again, that person may bring in something that I don't know, and I'm not a trained medical professional. And I don't think we have the trained people inside of our jails to really conduct those tests, or even to maybe take them somewhere where the test can be conducted.
And really, be honest, I'm making a comment. If they shoplift and they have a history of it, or it's a first time, really, if they get away, like, I know your job is to put the bad guys behind bars or arrest or fine or whatever you want to do and say the bad guys and break the law, then I get that. But come on, they stole a loaf of bread because they hung. I mean, really, that's where we are. And Chief Humphrey, the same question for you. What if you ran the jail? What would you do in terms of people coming in, the signs, quarantine, and all that? But here's another part of that. What if you have someone, and Sheriff Green, you can comment after this. What if, Chief Humphrey, you had someone that was arrested in the midst of this virus, released, and then they did something, you had to arrest them again? So what are you like? Are you overly concerned that maybe they got the virus? And, you bringing them back in. Is there any different dynamic if you were running the jail, Chief Humphrey, in that regard?
Well, I think you'd have to get with the number one. You'd have to get with the police chiefs that you serve. It's they utilize the jail that you run, and then the prosecuting attorney or the district attorney, and basically said these are the things that we're going to accept, and these are the things we're not going to accept. We're not going to accept, case in point, we're not going to accept someone who shoplifting for a minor item. We're not going to accept somebody who's got misdemeanor warrants, traffic warrants. We're just not going to do that. And I think you have to sit down and lay out those rules of this is what we're going to accept, this is what we're not going to accept. When your people come into the jail, this is what we expect. We expect them to wear the proper PPE. We expect to abide by these rules. I think when you lay those things out, then people know exactly what you will and what you will not accept. But that's the first thing I would do. And you just have to make some hard decisions. It's not the first time that a jail or a sheriff has had to set guidelines that we're not going to accept people. This happens all over the nation. You have jails that say they're not going to accept misdemeanor arrest. You have people say we're not going to accept misdemeanor warrants. We're going to have those warrants are going to have to be served later until we don't have the overcrowding or we don't have this epidemic. I mean, it's pretty much as simple as that.
In LA,
real quick though. I was going to say, Chief Humphrey, though, and also if you could address the second part of that question, which is, what if you have a repeat offender in the midst of this virus? How are you going to handle that person? Do you just, if it's a felony, then, if it's a serious charge, you bring him in, and he might have been exposed. If he's not exposed, it's asymptomatic, so you don't know if he has it or not. It could be dormant, and then he shows the signs and he affects more people. How do you handle that part?
Well, it goes right back to what we said earlier. You got to have those protocols in place, and that person, if you're bringing that person back in for the same misdemeanor or the same warrants, we're not keeping that person. And then that's going to be a phone call that as a sheriff I'm going to have to make to the police chief and say, hey, this is the deal. We're not accepting that person, and this is the reason why. Tell your officers that this is not an exigent circumstance in which this person needs to be brought to jail, period. No ifs, ands, or buts, just period.
Chief Green, you were about to say?
Yeah, and I totally agree with what Chief Humphrey said, is that, you get somebody who, they were arrested on Monday and Wednesday that same person is arrested for another misdemeanor charge, and they're right back in your county jail. My direction would be to that agency is that, you guys need to have another alternative to bringing this person to jail, because, again, I think we're in a situation where we don't know. And I don't want to take the chance of saying, well, just because we don't know this person committed this misdemeanor crime, we're going to put them in jail. Well, 3 weeks later, now that person is tested positive for the virus. Now I've got to go back to this chief and say, well, listen, you guys are responsible for this. So we don't want to have a situation where there is some contention between law enforcement because of a power issue of, this person committed a crime in our community and we brought them to the jail, and this is where our judge told us to bring them to. So there's a lot of people that are, whether it be the police chief, whether it be the sheriff, whether it be a judge, decisions have to be made as to what's best for public health and public safety. And again, it would just not be that this person would be inside of a jail. And one of the things I was going to say is that, crime is going to continue. You're going to have people that's going to be arrested for drinking and driving. You're going to have people be arrested for shoplifting, or all of these criminal things are continue to happen. Even though we're in the midst of a pandemic, we still have that segment of people who are going to commit a crime as if it wasn't a pandemic going on. So I think that's where leadership comes in, and how that leader, as whether it be the sheriff or whether it be the police chief, the decisions that they have to make that's going to make sure that their people are safe, as well as everybody else that is working in that facility.
If you're just joining us, we're talking with Chief Humphrey, the Chief of Police of Little Rock, Arkansas, and of course Sheriff-elect Virgil Green in Oklahoma City, running for sheriff here on the Batchelor News Radio Show. Guys, we got to echo somewhere. If someone's on speaker, if they can or mute that, that'd be good. But I did have two questions from the emailers, and I'm gonna go to you, Chief Humphrey, first. The first question, and I'll ask Sheriff Green the same question. First to you, Chief Humphrey. What if they said, Mike and Charlotte said, what if you're working for someone who knows, it may not, I guess, obviously they're not saying Little Rock, but if you're in that situation, who knows that on the books, I guess they're going back to racial profiling, on the books that you cannot wear a mask in public or in stores or whatever in that particular city or county, and you feel morally against that, how do you fight that? How do you work with that, they said?
Well, you do an emergency order based on the fact of what's going on, and say that you may encounter these situations. And remember, there is a pandemic, and remember, people have a right to protect their safety and their health. Absent any type of criminal activity or suspicious activity, you will not be stopping individuals with a mask on.
Sheriff Green, the same thing, and Sheriff Green, the same thing. And I know in Atlanta, the mayor there and the mayor, in, I believe in Washington, both black females, by the way, have said, look, I put it in order. I overrode that order, saying, look, I told my police department, you are not to stop based on mass. You are to stop on everything that you guys said in terms of suspicion, based on whatever. So how do you fight that from a standpoint if you're for it and your mayor or those above you are against it?
Well, and I think that's where, again, you have to have that level of communication. And obviously, if you have a governor who has set out some type of a proclamation that says that this is the letter of the law and this is what we shall follow, and you've got a mayor who decides, in my city, this is what I'm going to do, then obviously some people really need to sit down and determine what is the best for the safety of everybody. And I think I would probably say, well, listen, Mayor, if you want to enforce this, then why don't you just come out here and you get in the car with one of these officers and you put your life on the line is what they're trying to do, and let's determine how serious you are about having this enforced. And I think when you put people in those situations, and it just comes back to common sense. You know, I think the most intelligent people sometimes don't even have the most common sense to decide this is not something that we should be doing or something that I'm going to make my police officers enforce. So, again, use some common sense, but if common sense isn't there, then let's say, all right, Mr. Mayor or Mr. City Manager, why don't you come out here and you put yourself in that situation? And I'm pretty sure that conversation will probably change real quick. But at the same time, you just got to have those blunt conversations with people. And if they don't like them, then I think, we can agree to disagree, but this is something that we just don't know. And we don't know what can happen 2 weeks from now or what can happen days from now.
Yeah, and then every city and state, in certain, not every, I'm saying in certain cities and states across the country where it hasn't affected many, and state of North Carolina, thank God, if you will, it hasn't, but they're expecting here in the next 2 weeks is going to really be bad. Doug in Tampa, Chief Humphrey said, have you seen crime rise in your city because of the virus in terms of, I guess, less people out but more criminals out, or have you seen a decline, or pretty much just the same?
Well, it's about the same here in Little Rock. Now, what we are starting to see creep up are domestic calls. With everybody being inside, there are going to be those calls. There are going to be those disagreements. There are going to be those tensions going to rise and things like that. We're starting to see that creep up a little bit. But for the most part, all other crimes are pretty much just have flatlined. But that's a big concern of mine right now is the domestic violence.
And Chief, just to follow up with you, if that's the case and it's a tragedy, what do you do with those people? I mean, you can arrest them if it's the husband or the wife or whoever, and you take them to jail, and then it happens again. How do you handle that situation, especially if they're repeat offenders?
Well, we strongly emphasize to that victim the protective orders. A lot of times the suspect does not violate that protective order because it could affect their final disposition of their case. A lot of times it's just verbal altercations, and then what we do is we provide resources. But, I haven't seen any repeat locations, and looking at the stats, everything that I've seen have been new locations. But the main thing is, have an education process in place, and people know the resources, and utilize all the resources that you have in order to prevent the stuff from occurring again.
Is
in LA,
agreeing the same thing that you, Doug in Tampa? I mean, you run it. Let's say in your city, in your county, would you expect crime to go up or stay the same or lower? And then you can address that part in terms of domestic violence, which is really, really tragic.
Yeah, well, and I'll address the part on the domestic violence because here in Oklahoma City area, the metro area of Oklahoma City, there has been a 11% increase in domestic violence from this time in March of 2019 compared to March of 2020. That was reported by the Oklahoma City Police Department. So that is a real serious. That's one of those things, LA, where if a police officer sees signs of an injury to either the man or the woman, it is an automatic arrestable offense because if it even occurred in the presence of a minor, now you've got that crime has been enhanced. So now you put in a situation where you may have to take the husband to jail, or you may have to take the mom to jail because there are clear signs that one of the victims is injured. And now what does that officer do? Well, clearly the law states that there's an injury, that person goes to jail. You don't really have a choice. So that's a situation where it really creates a bigger problem because you don't have a lot of alternatives to do with that individual. And if there is a child involved in it, in the presence of this, now you've got to deal with how do you remove the child and the parent, the mom, or how do you work that situation out? So again, there has definitely been an increase in domestic violence and an increase in child abuse being reported because you've got a lot of parents who are at home with their kids, and a lot of things are occurring inside of those homes, and now where law enforcement has to be called in to deal with those situations.
Running out of time. We got one more from the e-bag, Chief Humphrey. Marcia in Jacksonville asked, do you have enough for your officers in terms of equipment to protect themselves? So much of what we see on TV now, doctors and nurses and first responders, they're pleading and begging for that equipment. Then, the mask and the gloves and everything else. Do the officers in your department have what they need to do their jobs and be safe at the same time?
Yeah, we're trying to keep them. Equipped with that stuff, but we do run low, and we have a really good emergency management team that continues to try to provide us with the resources that we need in order to protect the officers. It's difficult right now. I mean, let's just be honest. It's difficult, but we're trying to do the best we can.
Yeah. Same thing. Have you heard in Oklahoma City, Sheriff Green, are the officers there or the sheriff's department there equipped to be able to do their job and be safe at the same time to go home to their families?
Yeah, and one of the things, I think a lot of the smaller agencies are getting a lot of the resources that some of the larger agencies are receiving as well. And so one of the things I haven't seen a lot of police officers wearing those type of protective masks when they're out dealing with the public. And I think, again, that's where some strict policies or some strict guidelines should be put in place that how they're going to protect themselves when dealing with the public. But I have to say, LA, I think the public has really stepped up here. I know in Oklahoma City where a lot of people are donating, they're making masks, they're donating the masks to police departments as well as they're donating them to the professionals in the hospital. So again, this is just something that we're going to have to learn to deal with. It's the way of life for right now. And I think we really need to take it much more serious, because even though they're saying, hey, you're almost at your peak, things are kind of going to level out, but I think we're still having a lot of people who are not. And even in our profession in law enforcement, where you don't really see everybody, 100% of everybody taking those safety measures and wearing those protective masks in any time they're coming into contact with people.
And when it gets warm, people start acting a fool. They've been locked up, or knocked up. Maybe the locked up is not the right word, but confined in the house for a while, and tempers are flaring. And unfortunately, as both of you mentioned, it leads to domestic situations, if you will. And so we shall see. I want you both to kind of touch on, before you go, the show you will have here on the Batchelor News Radio Network, You and the Law. What it's about to you. Start with you, Sheriff Green, and if you can give your website, as I know you're running for sheriff there in your county.
Okay, so the show that we're going to be, and again, LA, I want to thank you for giving us the opportunity to have this platform and to bring this show to your network. And it's something that me and a good friend of mine, Chief Humphreys, have talked about. We want to put out something to the public where we're having an honest conversation about the citizens and the police. And the name of the show is You and the Law. And we want to give people the best information we can about what their rights are when dealing with the police, and how that police officer should deal with them when they encounter that citizen. So we're going to have I think we've got some good topics that we've come up with to talk about, from racial profiling all the way down to immigration. So we're excited about it. I don't know if Chief Humphreys is excited as I am about it, but He's a little older than I am, so I think, and I'm younger, so I think I'm a little bit more excited about it. I don't know. What about you, Chief Humphreys? Are you excited about it?
Well, first of all, man, you're probably about 3 weeks younger than me. But the most part is, we're excited. You know, it's an opportunity to hear from over 50 years of law enforcement experience about, real talk about law enforcement. You know, listen to the citizens' frustration, be able to answer their questions without making excuses, and then talk about things that they may not be aware about. So, yeah, we're excited about it. And once again, LA, you and I have been knowing each other for a few years. We've formed a really strong friendship. So thank you for this opportunity.
Well, and I have to say, the fact is you in the law and is coming from a law enforcement perspective, I can imagine if not already, but soon, that you're going to get some feedback from those who look like you that have that uniform, and those who don't look like you who have that uniform, and it'll be interesting. And I definitely will be interested to know what kind of comments you have. But we're happy to have you guys. We love you and we appreciate you. And the insight that folks are listening to right now speaks to what they will get to come in the very, very short term. We'll continue to talk about that as the days and hours go. Chief Humphrey, Sheriff Green, please do be safe wherever you are, wherever you're going, whatever you're doing. We love you and appreciate you, and we'll talk next week because, you know, it's always something going on. I'll definitely have you on, and we'll get everything in place for you in the law. Thank you so much.
Hey,
all right,
you.
Thank you, brother. Take care.
All right.
Thanks. Chief Humphrey, of course, from Little Rock, Arkansas. He is the chief of police there, and Sheriff-elect Virgil Green in Oklahoma City, Oklahoma. And take a break, come back, get my good friend Tony T. McLean on the line. Some stuff we need to talk about to it in just a bit on the Batchelor News Radio Show, 646-929-0130. I want to remind people you will lose the live feed in the next 20 minutes, wherever you are. If you're listening online, if you're not on the line, you'll lose the live feed. You'll hear an old show. So if you want to continue, if we go a little bit past the top of the hour, wherever you are, you need to dial in now at 646-929-0130. Unless you are watching and listening on Periscope at LA Batchelor or on Facebook Live, LA Batchelor, Pad Nation. Big ups. My older, talk about old. My older brother, Junior, listening on Facebook and watching. You know I had to get that in, bro. I love you anyway. It is the Batchelor News Radio Show. Stay tuned. Welcome back to the show. We thank you for joining us on Facebook and, of course, on Blog Talk. Periscope, 646-929-0130, the number to get in touch with us. Press 1 to get on the line. Thanks to our guest, Chief Humphrey, Chief of Police of Little Rock, Arkansas, Virgil Green, candidate for sheriff in Oklahoma City. Also, Avneet Singh, the founder of the nonprofit think tank called The Voice of Mankind, coming on the show. I want to go back to the phones and bring in my good friend, old friend, and colleague, editor, Black Athlete Sports Network, Tony T. Mac McLean. My friend, what's going on, man?
I defer it back to the chief. You're only 3 weeks younger.
3 weeks in about, I don't know, 30 years, but anyway. T, I want to get to something that's debatable, if you will, and that would be Terry Bradshaw, an email I sent to you, that Bradshaw, former quarterback for the Pittsburgh Steelers, had made a couple of comments. The first of which he said that, Tom Brady is not the greatest quarterback of all time, specifically based on the talent level. Now, I'm a huge Dan Marino fan, so Dan Marino could do no wrong. He got to the one Super Bowl. He didn't win, so I was so upset about that. But Bradshaw mentioned that Dan Fouts, Dan Marino, and Roger Staubach were clearly better talent-wise than Tom Brady. But he went on to say, and I'm paraphrasing, that, if you base it on Super Bowl wins for a quarterback, then Brady's the greatest. But talent-wise, those three off the jump are better. He did say that Brady's better than Breeze. But, he makes a great point, Tony. And let's not forget to mention, and I mentioned this on Facebook, Warren Moon, that those four guys in this era, in particular the three, Staubach was more running and throwing, but those other three throwing the ball. In this era, with all the offensive leniency that you get in terms of the calling and everything, those guys could have threw for 6,000, 7,000 yards every year. So sure, I think they're better than Tom Brady in that regard.
Can we throw Joe Montana in that conversation somewhere? Can we throw?
Well, yeah, and he went on to say Montana was the best anyway. So
Can we throw Johnny Unitas in there? See, Warren's got 5 championships, got 4 or 5 Grey Cups. So
right.
And plus, he's thrown for over a gazillion yards, through both leagues. So he needs to be in there. But look, Brady's. Brady is probably going to be mentioned. I agree with Bradshaw. I don't think he's the greatest. I think of who I have seen, if I had one game to win, I'm gonna go with Mr. Montana.
Right.
That's the guy that I would go with. Another guy that gets lost in the shuffle is Otto Graham. Otto Graham played 10 years. Played in championship game, and I think, 8 of them? This is counting both the old AAFL and the NFL. I mean, look, because of this era, we always laugh about it's the ESPN era, where if it didn't happen before '79, it didn't exist. But no, I mean. Look, I know you did. Look, there's gonna be folks. It's like the Jordan and James mess as well. Everybody has a preference. I don't think that Brady is the best of all time. Is he best for his era? Probably.
But just in terms of that word prolific, and that's why I mentioned Warren Moon. Warren Moon put up huge numbers in the CFL and great numbers in the NFL. And if I take any kind of problem with Bradshaw, is that he didn't mention him. Bradshaw's got some issues on that side, which we'll talk about some other time. But Warren Moon was accurate. He had the arm strength. He could play in the dome. He could play outside to throw. Like I said, Marino, I didn't see it was Dan Fouts in terms of the quick release, and then Marino was the newer age version of the Dan. You couldn't sack him because he got rid of the ball so fast, and great in accuracy, and with no defense. By the way, both those players play with really essentially, for the most part of their careers, with no defense. So I can't even. I can put Brady in there because he's got the 6 Super Bowls. But if you're going to base it on Super Bowls, just solely on Super Bowls, then throw in Trent Dilfer and Eli Manning and everybody else. I guess that won.
No. I don't know. There's a difference because here's the thing. Winning a Super Bowl is very important because another thing also, you got to throw Bradshaw in the conversation too. I mean, that was the one thing that I was kind of surprised. Well, I guess that's just him being modest with us. But you got to throw Bradshaw in that conversation, I think, for in that top 10 greatest of all time. But here's the thing. I know you're not the biggest Manning fan, but Manning's probably going to get in. I'm talking about Eli. Manning's going to
right.
You win multiple Super Bowls, you deserve to be in the Hall of Fame. Now, the other end of that is, what about Jim Plunkett? Because Jim Plunkett won 2. And to be quite honest with you, it's probably different tiers, I guess. I guess you got to do for lack of a better word, gold, silver, and bronze. I guess I would put, say, Eli and Plunkett in that silver. I put guys that have just won one, like a one-hit wonder sort of thing. That's why I think it would be a stretch to put Trent Dilfer even in the bronze medal category. But
yeah, no, and I get what you're saying. I'm just saying if people, especially these morons that call themselves reporters, are going to base it just solely on Super Bowls, then just go right down the line. Whoever got a Super Bowl is great. If you're going to base it solely on that.
Mm-hmm. And here's the funny thing. These are the same folks that will tell you Jordan is clearly better than LeBron. Well, why are we comparing LeBron to Jordan? Should we be comparing him to Bill Russell, who's won more?
Right.
But see, you would have thought, when the NFL is a year removed from the 100th anniversary, and we saw all sorts of these, top 100 teams, top 100 players, top 100, they just, and you've been seeing, I think they've been even re-showing some of this stuff during the pandemic, literally for programming until we get closer to the draft. To me, in a lot of instances, they copped out and they went, I guess the best word is they went too contemporary because, see, remember, 100 years. Now, yes, the game has changed, needless to say, even just from the past 50 years. But that's why that's why when you keep hearing things in regards to greatest ever. See, my thing is, I'm very hard pressed to call folks greatest ever that are still playing.
Right.
They have the potential to be there. Because my thing is, you're basically trying to write a 12 chapter play in one act, and that's too much. Now, yes, Brady's been around for 20 years, so you can get so you can gauge a little bit more. But especially with football, when you realize how the game has changed, how the game has evolved, I was just randomly looking. I was watching something online today, and they re-showed the Tony Dorsett 99-yard run. Mm-hmm. Now, I completely forgot about the fact that they did that with 10 men on the field. And most of it, and if you've ever seen the run, and I actually saw it live when it happened, and then I've seen it subsequent times, but I saw it again today, and it really got me to thinking, of all the great plays that have gone on in NFL history, that that's got to be at least mentioned. I mean, I know there's going to be certain things, the catch, the immaculate reception, a few other things over the years, but I really think, in regards to that, the NFL really dropped the ball in regards to letting you really get an insight on their history, because they literally just, I think, if I remember correctly, they picked Bill Belichick, I guess, as the greatest coach. With all due respect, they do call that the Lombardi Trophy.
Not the Belichick Football Trophy. Yeah, and it's funny. Tony Dorsett, a.k.a. Flip Wilson, lookalike, that I used to cheer for. But, yeah, my brother's a big Cowboy fan listening. I have to tease him a little bit. But you're right when you look at that. They are quick to say, they already, like you said, Brady, 20 years, and he's the GOAT, which I hate that term anyway. Is he look like a GOAT? I mean, I know what it means, and
you have to ask Gabrielle that, because I'm staying away from all that.
But they don't, when they talk about the greatest, and you talked about it making Belichick the greatest of all time, they not only leave off some of the great white coaches and players, they certainly leave off some of the great black, aka HBCU in particular, great players. That's why I said, for me, and my top three, honestly, and I'm not just saying this because of that, because of Warren Moon, my top three is Joe Montana, Dan Marino, and Warren Moon, all time. That's my three right there.
And you know what? You can't go wrong with either one of them. They all threw for a galaxy of yards and touchdowns. Now, where people are going to slight Warren is he doesn't have a Super Bowl ring, but he does have the 5 CFL championships. And I know people are going to be like, CFL championships don't mean nothing, but he did 5 straight. 5 straight championships.
5 straight. That's right.
So say what you want. Unitas has to be in the mix because of the way what Wilt Chamberlain was to centers. That's what Johnny Unitas was for quarterbacks, and that's that. And so in that difference, it's like what Hank Aaron means to the home run. That's what Unitas is. You got to throw in with coaches also. Even as much of a racist as he was, you have to put Papa Bear Hallis in the mix. You got to throw Shula in there as well. As much as we may not be crazy about him, but again, that's the thing. It's when you're talking greatest of all time, you can't just narrow it to a 20 or 15 year whatever. Now, if you're saying best you've ever seen, that's easier. But see, that's the difference about now, at the risk of sounding like the old guy in the barbershop, that's the problem with the modern era. Everybody's quick to be like greatest of all time, and I'm like, can we which is why don't you just say greatest what you've ever seen? Because look, I saw Johnny Unitas late in his career when he wasn't Johnny Unitas. I didn't see Otto Graham live at all. I never saw Jim Brown. Now I've seen tapes, films, read about them, and all the other stuff, so I can get a feel for it. And then plus, there's the numbers, but even the numbers you have to take into context. And it would be it's even worse now because at the risk of sounding like of this being a shameless plug, myself and a bunch of other folks, a few years back, we put together a book called Four Quarters of Soul, and we basically talked about all the HBCU players who should be in the Hall of Fame but aren't. Now, subsequently, a couple of them have now been put in. Donnie Shell is now in, and who's the other guy? But there's a whole bunch of other players who need to be in, and that's another 2-hour conversation in and of itself. But even with the NFL coming off the 100th anniversary and them basically having two Hall of Fame classes this year, a regular class and then a 100th anniversary, supplement, there's still about 5 to 10 guys in each era that aren't in and need to and deserve to be in. Guys like a Jim Marshall, a Cliff Branch, a Winston Hill from the old Jets. There's a bunch of guys. We could go on all day, and I'm saying that every era, whether it's the 40s, 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s, and beyond, there are at least 5 to 10 guys I feel that you say to yourself, this guy's not in.
Right. And ironically, my top 3 all time would be all time and who I saw, in terms of in my era, which would be Montana, Marino, and Warren Moon, probably in that order. And it's interesting enough. I think a lot of people, in terms of Bradshaw, before we go on to baseball, a lot of people aren't taking Bradshaw serious because he said that Big Ben is the greatest quarterback in the history of the Steelers. So maybe he's being too modest. Maybe he's just trying to spark a little debate. And things are, it could be theatric, but it could be the debate, legitimate debate. I think the first one, which he said Brady's not the greatest, is here why, is certainly up for debate.
Oh, look, it's, unfortunately, also now you have guys that that basically have a man crush on Brady. Mm-hmm. And it obscures their objectivity, and it's really put this way, it's going to be even more so on display this year. If he play, in Tampa, and God forbid if the Patriots and Tampa play during the regular season this year.
I know, right? Wouldn't that be something? I'm not a big Bruce Arians fan, so that and the fact that Brady's been dinking and dunking for so long, now they want him to go deep. Is going to be interesting to see what they do on offense with him, and that offensive line that they better protect, because he's got happy feet, the same happy feet that the guy he replaced in New England when he started his whole career, which would be Drew Bledsoe. So I think that's interesting. Do you want to switch to baseball? A-Rod was on a show talking about the virus and when baseball can come back, and you and I had talked about they're talking about May and maybe going to Phoenix and playing everything there. He made it some good interesting topics and he brought up, and a few of them I were already thinking about, but a couple of them he already mentioned. One is this is an opportunity to maybe, I don't know if it fixed is the best word, T, but have a better relationship between the Players Association and ownership with the downtime, if you will. If that's the case, what would you, if you were on either side, what would you like to see better, not just for that relationship, but would be better for the fan?
DH.
Oh, and I was going there next, but go ahead. Why DH?
The conversation to me starts and ends right there. The National League is the only league in professional baseball that refuses to use the designated hitter. Enough already. You're a National League guy too, so I root for a team. My favorite team. I've always said that. Here's the thing. To me, the whole argument, I'm not even getting into that whole strategy sort of thing. To me, that's BS. The thing is, all these years we've heard the American League is so much better because of the DH. Well, I just would like to see, can I see it in both leagues for about 2-3 years, and then we can really see if the American League is all that. And look, there's going to be these same purists that, this isn't softball. Well, if you're going to be a purist, then there'd be no black players. There'd be very little Hispanic players. I mean, if we're going to go into history, let's do the whole history. Don't just cherry pick history when it's convenient for you. And
really, you're going to see a bunch of crime dogs and Rafael Palmeiros and others at the twilight of their career. If they go in the National League, they extend their careers if they're DHs. They just come in and hit. If the National League, you got more older players playing.
I've got no problem with that. See, to me, and I think this is the three elephants in the room, not just one elephant, not just two elephants. Sorry, LeBron, but three elephants in the room, because let's face it, baseball over the past few years, offensively, is starting to lead out. Like the last 2 seasons was the first time there were more. Let me make sure I get this right. There were more strikeouts than hits in all of Major League Baseball, and this was without guys like Dave Kingman and others. This is, the whole thing. If you struck out more than say 150 times in a season, it was sort of embarrassing. Now that's the norm. So I would think, and again, it's not like this is not like Bob Gibson where they lowered the mound after Gibson had the 1.12 ERA, but it's starting to even out a bit. And I would think that if you had the DH, you would see offensive numbers go up. And look, all these folks who talk about how the sky is falling and this is going to ruin baseball or whatever, look, nothing could be worse than the 94 strike where they canceled everything. And we all survived that. If you're really trying to tell me that bringing the DH is a sign of the apocalypse, then by all means stay the hell home. Don't ever watch another baseball game, and wear your mask and your gloves and all that. You know what I'm saying? But I get so tired of these fatalistic folks that think that if the National League has the DH, the quality of the game is going to go down.
You do get some people that, I'm not saying that they're right, but you do get some people that say, to your point of the Dave Kingmans, and I'm not picking on Aaron Judge. Certainly he's a Yankee, but you'll get an Aaron Judge version of Dave Kingman now that's going to foul you with some deep home runs, but to strike out a lot. So some people feel like you bring in more DH, you're going to get that they're not playing the positions. They're just going up there swinging and missing. So maybe you get more strikeouts, which kind of increases sort of that hit or miss a number in the game if you bring it in the National League.
Yeah, but see, here's the thing. Isn't that what the minor leagues is all about? See, that's where people lose. That's where the times where you lose argument. And see, again, when you use historical, Sandy Koufax and Nolan Ryan are basically, to a certain extent, the same guy. The first part of their career, great stuff, but they were wild. You got to remember, Tom Lasorda and Sandy Koufax pitched on the same Dodger team, and it took Koufax forever to turn into the Koufax that we know now, because he was just that wild. But see, again, what's happening now is this rush to sending guys up before their time. I'll give you a perfect example. We talk about how it took Chauncey Billups forever to become Chauncey Billups, right?
That's a great point. Now, I got an email to respond to that, but go ahead.
No, I'll take it. Go ahead.
Because they were saying, look, in the minor leagues, it's sort of like the NBA in college, like they're not teaching these guys the fundamental of pitching or being a professional hitter.
Thank you, Captain Obvious. We agree. And Steve, that's the thing. These guys, the analysis I was going to use was Steven Strasburg. Steven Strasburg is now finally who we thought he was going to be. But look how long it took him to be that. Now, a lot of it had to do with the fact that, the Nationals were trying to find a franchise guy and all this other stuff. But back in the day, Steven Strasburg would have done for maybe 5 years before he was brought up. Now, look, are there going to be exceptions? Absolutely. Dave Winfield never played a day in the minor leagues, rightfully so, because he was grain talent before then. Barry Bonds only played a handful of minor league games. Your boy Jeter, only a handful. Remember, Jeter had he had 36 errors in his first season of professional baseball. So back then they were probably saying, "What? Him? Nah, it's going to take him a while." But then within whatever he got it, whatever. But see, that's the thing. Now guys are learning in the majors, and that's just see, to me, and it's not just pitching, it's hitting as well. There's way too much on the job training that goes on in Major League Baseball.
But Tony, let me ask you this though.
Hello? Hello? You still there?
I am here. Can you hear me?
Yeah, I hear you now.
Okay, I don't know what happened there. But when you look at the situation and the minors you talked about, if you're getting on-the-job training and it's a situation where, let's say if you were taking math or something and you're struggling in math, but they keep pushing you through, middle school, elementary, high school, college, whatever,